Hello, and welcome to lesson 23 of this basic biblical Greek course. In today's lesson, we are going to learn our last two pronouns, specifically the reflexive and the reciprocal pronouns. And thereafter, we'll do a revision of all the pronouns that we've learned in this basic biblical Greek course so far. And since we're doing a bit of revision, we'll also take a look at the prepositions that we've learned in this course and revise those. And then we'll finish with our vocabulary and translation work for this lesson. So let's get going together. So I'd like to begin this lesson by talking about reflexive pronouns. So let's first take a look at a definition of these pronouns. So reflexive pronouns essentially reflect back to the subject of the verb, usually as a direct object of the verb. So if you can't remember what a reflexive pronoun is, here are the 9 English reflexive pronouns. Let's take a look at them. We have myself, yourself, himself, herself, oneself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. So quite a mouthful there, but those are the 9 types of reflexive pronouns that we get in English. Now, keep in mind that while intensive pronouns and reflexive pronouns look similar, they are different. So how are they different? Well, intensive pronouns are used to emphasize the subject in a sentence, often in the sense of and not someone else. So you can tell when a word is being used as an intensive pronoun because the sentence it is part of will not change in meaning if you removed it. So let's take a look at an example together. I could say, I myself am teaching this lesson. So here the pronoun myself is identifying I as the specific person who is teaching this lesson. And the sentence would still make sense if it was removed. So if I go back to that statement and I remove the pronoun myself, and it just read, I am teaching this lesson, that would still make perfect sense. All right, so the intensive pronoun, myself, or any other type of intensive pronoun is there to emphasize the subject in a sentence. So let's carry on with reflexive pronouns. Let's remind ourselves of a definition. Reflexive pronouns reflect back to the subject of the verb, usually as a direct object of the verb. So reflexive pronouns differ from intensive pronouns because they have a reflexive action. So let me give you 2 examples to demonstrate what we mean by reflexive action. I could say, I congratulated my student for teaching this lesson. And in this scenario, student would be the direct object in the sentence. However, if I said, I congratulated myself for teaching this lesson, now myself is a direct object which reflects back to the subject. All right, so myself would reflect back to the subject, which is I. So here's an example from scripture. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5a. So it reads, He autus peirezete a este en te piste, which we could translate as examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. So this example actually begins with a Greek reflexive pronoun, which is he autus, which we've rendered in the English as yourselves. So let's make 1 or 2 observations about it. Notice that the reflexive pronoun reflects back to the subject you. So the subject you is implied in the verb, which is an imperative, peirezete, and functions as the direct object to the verb perizete, which means examine. All right, so I hope that just clarifies the difference between an intensive pronoun and a reflexive pronoun. Intensive pronouns, again, will emphasize the subject of a sentence, whereas the reflexive pronoun has more of a reflexive action, reflecting back to the subject of a specific sentence. Now, before I teach you the actual forms of the reflexive pronouns, I'd like to make you aware of some observations that will help to simplify memorizing the various reflexive pronoun forms. So the first observation that I want you to be aware of is that all the plural forms of the reflexive pronoun are the same. The second observation is that the Greek reflexive pronouns are a combination of a personal prefix and an intensive pronoun. So let's take a look at those combinations together. The first person is M, all right, that's the personal prefix, plus the intensive pronoun out, and then either the first or second declension endings. The second person is the personal prefix se plus out plus first and second declension endings. And then the third person is the personal prefix he plus out plus first and second declension endings. All right, so if you can take the time just to learn these combinations, then it's really going to make the declining of these various reflexive pronouns much easier for you. Then the last observation is this. The reflexive pronoun can never be the subject of the sentence, and so it does not have a nominative case form. So as you're going to see, we're only going to deal with the genitive, the dative, and the accusative cases. So here are the first person reflexive pronoun forms. I've divided it up into the masculine gender and the feminine gender. The masculine will follow the second declension endings and the feminine the first declension endings. Also keep in mind that there's no nominative case, so we only have genitive, dative, and accusative, singular and plural forms. So let's take a look at the masculine forms together first. So we have M-out-tu, which we translate as of myself. The dative singular, M-out-to, to or for myself, and M-out-ton, which we translate as myself. So remember, for the singular forms, the combination is the personal prefix M plus the intensive pronoun out plus the second declension endings. And then the plural forms, remember that all the plural forms for the reflexive pronouns are the same. So the tip there at the bottom is only learn one set of plural endings. So let's have a look at one of those sets together. The genitive plural, we have he, our tone, which we translate as of ourselves. Then we have the dative plural, which is he, our tois, which is to or for ourselves. And then we have he, our tus, ourselves. So if you can just take the time to learn one of those plural sets, then you should have all the plural forms down for the reflexive pronouns. Let's quickly take a look at the feminine singular forms together. So the genitive singular is m-our-tes, the dative singular m-our-te, and the accusative singular is m-our-tain. Remember that the feminine will follow the first declension endings, and then the plural endings, as I've been saying, are the same again. Let's move on to the second person now. So let's take a look at the second person reflexive pronoun forms. Now, keep in mind that the only difference between the first and the second person is that the second person has a new personal prefix, which is now se. And the second difference is that we're going to translate the singular forms and the plural forms as yourself. So let's have a look at the masculine singular forms together. So we have se au tu, which we translate as of yourself. The dative singular se au to, which is to or for yourself. And the accusative singular se au ton, which we translate as yourself. And regarding the plural forms, they are the same again, except that we are to translate them now as he au ton, of yourselves, he au tois, to or for yourselves, and he au tous, yourselves. And then the feminine singular forms, our genitive singular is se au tes, dative singular se au te, and the accusative singular se au tain. Let's take a look now at the third person reflexive pronoun forms. The first difference that you will notice is that the third person consists of a masculine, feminine, and neuter gender. So the masculine and the neuter genders will follow the second declensions, and the feminine will once again follow the first declension endings. Also, take note of the personal prefix for the third person, which is now he, which I've highlighted in purple. And then regarding the translation of the third person, the singulars, we translate the masculine as himself, the feminine as herself, and the neuter as itself. And then the translation of the plural forms, we translate them as themselves. But the plural forms are the same as the first and second reflexive pronouns. So let's go through the singular forms very quickly. The masculine, the singulars, we have he au tu, the dative singular he au to, and the accusative he au ton. The feminine forms, we have he au tes, he au te, he au tain. And in the neuter singular forms, we have he au tu, he au to, and he au ta. So notice that the masculine and the neuter forms are exactly the same, except for the accusative singular, where the neuter does not have the new at the end. And then the plural forms, as I've been saying to you, are the same for all the persons. So if you just learn one set, you should be able to recognize them in the Greek New Testament. The last pronoun that I'd like to teach you is the reciprocal pronoun. So what is a reciprocal pronoun? It indicates reciprocity between two or more people. So the English equivalent is one another. Now, two observations that I want to make you aware of. It is always plural and never in the nominative case, just like the reflexive pronoun. And then the lexical form of the reciprocal pronoun is the genitive alone. So there are only three forms to learn for the reciprocal pronouns. Let's have a look at them together. The genitive is alone, which we translate as of one another. The dative form is luis, which we translate as to or for one another. And then the accusative form is lus, which we translate as one another. So the remainder of this lesson is going to be a revision of the various pronouns that we've learned in this basic biblical Greek course. And a really helpful acronym to help you to remember the different pronouns is the acronym DRIP, where D stands for the demonstrative pronoun, R stands for the relative, reflexive, and reciprocal pronouns. I stands for the interrogative and indefinite pronouns, and P stands for the personal pronoun. So if you can remember this acronym, it'll help you to navigate your way through the various pronouns that we've learned in this course so far. So what I'd like to do now is do a quick review of each of the pronouns that we have learned so far in this basic biblical Greek course. So using our acronym DRIP, let's start with demonstrative pronouns. So let's remind ourselves of the definition. A demonstrative pronoun is the pointing out pronoun. And please refer to lesson 10 for more details of this specific pronoun. But there are essentially two forms or types of demonstrative pronouns. The first one is the hutos form. So these are the nominative singular forms. The hutos is the masculine. Then we have haute, which is the feminine gender, and tuta, which is the neuter gender. And the way that we translate the hutos form, in the singular it is this, and the plural it's these. And in the second form is the ekainos, ekaine, and ekaina. Those once again are the nominative singular forms, the masculine, feminine, and neuter. And we translate this demonstrative pronoun in the singular as that, and in the plural those. Just remember these two things when declining hutos specifically. The first one is that each form, except the masculine and feminine nominatives, begins with a tau. And then the second thing is the first omicron changes to an alpha whenever alpha or eta occurs in the ending. Right, so declining hutos can be quite tricky, but if you can remember those two things, it shouldn't cause you too many problems. All right, let's continue with our review of the pronouns. And using our acronym DRIP, we now move on to the R. Let's take a look at relative pronouns. So here's a definition to remind us of what a relative pronoun is. It is a pronoun that usually relates back to an antecedent noun and allows the writer to make an additional explanatory comment about that noun. The relative pronouns are who, whom, that, which, and whose. So please refer back to lesson 13 of this basic biblical Greek course if you want to look at the details again. So I've given you a table summarizing the relative pronouns. I'm not going to go through all the forms with you, but I just want to remind you that the relative pronouns are very similar to the Greek articles. The difference is that the relative pronouns have both the rough breathing mark and an accent. All right, that's how you're going to distinguish a relative pronoun from the Greek articles. So I'm not going to go through the reflexive and reciprocal pronouns again because we've covered those in our lesson already. So let's move on to I of our acronym DRIP, which is the interrogative and indefinite pronouns. So let's take a look at a definition for each one. Firstly, an interrogative pronoun is used to ask a question. So for example, who, what, which, or why. And then an indefinite pronoun refers to a person or thing that cannot be specifically identified. For example, someone, a certain man. So please refer to lesson 13 for more details regarding these two types of pronouns. But I suppose the most important thing to remember regarding interrogative and indefinite pronouns is that these pronouns are declined using the third declension endings. All right, so you can see that in the table that I've given you here. On the left-hand side are the interrogative pronouns. Remember that the interrogative pronoun has the accent, and then the indefinite pronouns on the right-hand side generally don't have an accent, or the accent moves to the end of the word. But please keep in mind that the way you decline each one of them is using the third declension endings. Let's take a look at P in our acronym DRIP, which refers to personal pronouns. So let's begin with a definition. A personal pronoun is a word that takes the place of a person or noun. So please refer to Lesson 8 for more details regarding personal pronouns. Just remember, if a form of autos modifies a noun rather than takes the place of a noun, it is functioning as an intensive pronoun when we translate it as self, or an identical pronoun where we translate it as same. So here's a table just summarizing the forms of the personal pronouns. So the first person singular, we have ego, which is I or me. And then the second person singular, su, is you or your. The third person singular, autos, aute, auta. Those are the nominative singular forms, the masculine, the feminine, the neuter. And we translate that as he, she, or it. And then the plural forms, the first person is heimes, which is we or us. The second person plural is humes, which is you or your again. And then the third person plural is autoi, autai, and auta, they or them. I thought it would be helpful to also do a revision of the prepositions that we've learned in this basic biblical Greek course. So here's a table that summarizes all of the prepositions that we've learned so far. So before we go through each one of them, on the right hand side I've just made two notes. The first one is a Greek preposition always takes an object, either a noun or a pronoun. And then number two, each preposition requires its object to be in a certain case. All right, so I've actually color coordinated those cases. So the object will either be in the genitive, the dative, or the accusative cases. So let's go through each one of them very quickly. Start with apa. It takes its object in the genitive case and can be translated as from. Then we have hupa, which in the genitive is translated as by, and in the accusative under. Then we have en, which in the dative is translated in, on, among. Then we have ace, which in the accusative is rendered as into, in, or among. And next we have ek or ex, and the genitive is translated as out of or from. Then we have pros, takes its object in the accusative case and is translated as to, towards, or with. Then we have pro, which is translated in the genitive as before. Then dia, and with the genitive is translated as through and the accusative on account of. Next we have kata, which in the genitive is translated as down from or against, and in the accusative according to. Then we have peri, and the genitive is translated as concerning or about, and in the accusative around. Next we have sun, takes its object in the dative case and is translated as with. Next we have meta, and the genitive is with and the accusative is after. Then we have hupe, in the genitive on behalf of, and accusative above. Then we have para. Para can take its object in all three cases. With the genitive, we translate it as from, the dative beside and the presence of, and the accusative alongside of. Then enopion, in the genitive is before or in the presence of. Then we have exo, takes its object in the genitive case and is translated as outside or without. And then finally we have epi, which also takes its object in all three cases. So the genitive can be translated as upon, near, before, over, on the basis of, with the dative at, by, or on, and then finally the accusative across, to, or against. So I have to be honest with you. Learning the various English translations for all those prepositions are very difficult for me, and perhaps you feel the same way. So I just want to give you an alternative way to learn Greek prepositions, or just a different way to think about them. So if you're a visual learner like myself, maybe this perspective will appeal more to you. So when you think of the genitive case, think about something that is indicating motion away from an object. So looking at our visual diagram here, let's take a look at some examples. We have the preposition upper. It takes its object in the genitive case. So it's indicating motion away from the circle, so we can translate this as from. Then we have the preposition dear, which can also take its object in the genitive case. And here it's specifically indicating motion through the circle. And then we have ek, the preposition, which is conveying an object that is coming out of the circle. Then when you think of the dative case, think of preposition that is indicating rest. So here we have the example of en. So en is in the circle. Para can also take its object in the dative case, and when it does, we translate it as beside. So here it is beside the circle. And then lastly, when you think of the accusative case, it generally indicates some sort of motion. So here we have the example of the preposition pros, which indicates motion toward the circle, as well as ace, which is motion into the circle. And then we have a preposition here, huper, which I'm not too sure we've learnt yet, but this preposition is under the circle. Para can also take its object in the accusative case, and we translate that alongside of. So it's beside or alongside of the circle. Right, so I really just hope that this visual will just help you to learn the prepositions and to grasp them in terms of what's actually going on and what relationships they are indicating. Let's take a look at our vocabulary for lesson 23. So we have an adjective to start with, alethanos, alethanei, alethanon, which means true or genuine. Then we have the reciprocal pronoun, alelon, alelois, and alelus. Remember, there's only 3 forms of the reciprocal pronoun. There's no nominative form. So the alelon is the genitive, the alelois is the dative, and the alelus is the accusative. And we translate that as one another or sometimes each other. Then we have dokeo, dokeo, which means I seem or I think. Then we have eulogeo, eulogeo, which means I bless. Next we have marturia, hey, where we get our English martyr from, and this means witness or testimony. So when someone is being martyred for their faith, they are giving a witness or a testimony about their belief in Jesus Christ. Next we have metanoeo, which means I repent. Next we have uki. Remember, if you see a u in a word, that always means no or not, and it's a stronger form of u. Next we have soteria, where we get our theological term soteriology from, and that means salvation. And then we have phileo, which means I like or I love. And then finally we have kairo, kairo, which means I rejoice. Let's now take a look at our principal parts for this lesson. And today we're looking at principal parts 15, 16, and 17. Just remember that the goal of learning principal parts is not to memorize them unless you really have a photographic memory where you can do so. But if you don't, then we are aiming just to recognize the various principal parts for the various tenses. Those tenses are the present, the future active middle, the aorist active middle, the aorist passive, the perfect active, and the perfect middle passive. So our first principal part is upper lumi, which means destroy. So let's go through the principal parts. So we have the present, upper lumi, upper leso, apo lesa, apo lesthein, and upper lola. And then the perfect middle passive does not have a form in the New Testament. All right, our next principal part is hapto, which means burn. So let's go through the forms together. So we have hapto, hapso, hapsa, haphthein, hapha, and hamai. And then our last principal part is aresco, which means please. So we have aresco, areso, aresa, aresthein, arereka, and areresmai. All right, so please take the time to go through those carefully and with the intention of being able to recognize them in the Greek New Testament. So our first translation example is actually a scripture that comes from John 5 verse 31. So the Greek reads, Eon ego marturo peri emautu he marturia mu uk esten alethes. So we could translate this as, if I should be testifying concerning myself, my witness is not true. So let's make some observations here regarding the Greek. So we see that it starts off with eon. The eon is a particle that also introduces a third class conditional clause. So that's why we translate it as if. And that also tells us that a subjunctive verb is coming. So here we have marturo, which is a present, active, subjunctive, first person, singular. So we translate this as I should be testifying. And we haven't actually translated ego because that pronoun is simply there to emphasize the subject I. And then we have an example of a reflexive pronoun in the word mautu. So we see the personal prefix m, which tells us that this is a first person singular reflexive pronoun. And then we have the intensive pronoun out, and then the u, which tells us that this is a genitive case. And the question is, why is it a genitive case? And the answer to that is because it is functioning as the object of the preposition peri. All right, and peri can take its object in the genitive case, which it does here. So that's why emautu is in the genitive case. So we translate peri emautu as concerning myself. And then we have he marturia, which is the subject, witness, but we have a possessive personal pronoun here, so it's my witness. Then we have a linking verb, esten, which we translate as is, uk alethes, not true. And here, true is functioning as a predicate adjective. Right, so we have, if I should be testifying concerning myself, my witness is not true. Our next translation example reads as follows. A tis ek tu cosmu estin ha cosmos autos philese auton. So our translation could be, if anyone is from the world itself will love him. Let's make some observations here. The first one we see here, tis, which is an indefinite pronoun functioning as the subject of the sentence. So we translate that as anyone. Then we have our linking verb, estin, which we translate as is. And then we have ek tu cosmu, which we've translated as from the world. Now you would expect cosmu to be in the nominative case because it's functioning as a predicate nominative. But the reason why it's in the genitive case is because it is functioning as the object of the preposition ek, and ek takes its object in the genitive case. And then we have ha cosmos, the world, and then we have autos. So autos is a third person personal pronoun. It's standing in the predicate position. And so here it's functioning as an intensive pronoun. It's intensifying the subject cosmos. So we translate it as itself. And then we have this verb, philese, which is from our new vocab. So it comes from phileo. So what's happened is that in the future, the epsilon has lengthened to an eta. So that's why we have the eta here. So it's philese. So this is really just a simple future active indicative third person singular. And then autos, so we translate that as will love, and then we have auton, him. So if anyone is from the world itself will love him.